On a frosty day in November 2015, I received a mail order for my book, The Pie Seller, the Drunk, and the Lady, from Maria Roberts of Georgia. I was curious how she found me. Nestled in a lovely handwritten note was a check with her phone number. I made a call to her, which opened up an adventure and revelation of the Gist Gratz family legacy beyond my imagination. She encouraged me to visit whenever I was traveling her way. Thus, our friendship has evolved over the years. Today, I would like you to meet her for yourself. Hello, everyone. I'm Terry Foody, Kentucky author and speaker, the humanities in Lexington, Kentucky. And I just happened to meet Mariah Gratz Roberts of Atlanta, Georgia. When my first book, The Pie Seller, the Drunk, and the Lady, was released in 2014, I would get orders in the mail from my website for the book. So I got a check from her in Atlanta. Didn't have her full name, which said Mariah G.G. Roberts, but the phone number. And I was curious who would be ordering a book from Atlanta. So I called her, and she told me she was a Gratz, Mariah Gist Gratz and Roberts, direct descendant of
Mariah and Benjamin Gratz.
Yes, it's Benjamin Gratz. She comes down from their son Howard, who's featured in my second book.
The Cherokee and the Newsman, with Sequoyah and his
half-nephew Howard Gratz. So I was going to be taking a trip to Birmingham, Alabama in 2017. So we made a visit together to the original settlement for the Cherokees, where they had the capital, that capital. They had their courts and all that, and that was tying us into Howard and to Sequoyah, and also Christopher Gist. But you have a connection for people in Lexington with Benjamin Gratz and Mariah, with the park. And tell me a little bit about your visits there with your family.
Well, I remember I was about 11 or 12, and we came to Lexington. I think we had been to our farm in Indiana. On the way back, we stopped at Grandma Sally Gratz, and we visited her at Gratz Park. And the butlers served us drinks, and she was a lovely person, and I liked her a lot. And I remember it was a pleasant first visit. And then, unfortunately, there have been funerals. And my grandmother, Audrey, 18 of us came to Lexington for her funeral. And Aunt Fanny Gratz always had us to her house. And she served mint juleps.
The real Southern drink.
Yeah, and very pleasant. And then my Aunt Mary Alford died. We went back and got another invitation. And then my mother passed away in 1994. But Aunt Fanny was deceased by then. But Aunt Fanny always was very hospitable and enjoyed seeing her. And her sister, I think, lived with her at that time. She was very pleasant. We corresponded back and forth. Her sister was very friendly. Aunt Fanny was more reserved.
Fanny was one of the wives of one of Howard's sons, innocent. And Sally was Howard Gratz's third wife. And what she's not telling us here, but it happened, is that Sally lived in the small building, which is sometimes called the kitchen in Gratz Park, but Fanny lived in the old Gratz house. And your family is buried in the Lexington Cemetery with Howard, your direct family. Okay, so you've had yourself an interest in your own ancestors and other branches of the family, and not just locally in Lexington, but you're also related to the Blairs of the Blair house. How does that fit in?
Well, it was Mariah Gist's sister, Eliza Gist.
Yes.
Mary Preston Blair, Francis Preston Blair. I don't think he used Francis, maybe Preston. And that's how I'm connected. My Benjamin and Mariah, well, it would be their brother and sister-in-law. I mean, sister and brother-in-law.
Yes. And Praises Preston Blair became an advisor to Lincoln during the Civil War. He also was in the same administration with President Jackson.
And that's where he came to Washington because of Jackson.
Jackson and the Globe newspaper. He was editor of that. So then you get Howard being with the Kentucky Gazette. Also, there was a son, Frank Blair, in Missouri.
He was a general in the Union Army under Sherman. He was one of the 7 generals under Sherman.
So you have contacts and connections through these different people. And you mentioned Christopher Gist, who's in this painting up here behind you. Behind you?
Yes.
So Christopher was the father of Nathaniel Gist. And Nathaniel's the father of Sequoyah and your namesake, Mariah.
They never knew each other because you told me Mariah was born after Nathaniel died, which is very sad.
Which is true. Yeah.
But he also didn't have a part with Sequoyah. He left Tennessee, and he didn't have a part in his son's life either. So the oldest and the youngest child really didn't know Nathaniel.
Yeah. Yeah, they didn't. And there's some things in the book about a belief in a story with the family that Sequoyah did come to Canewood, did come to Kentucky to seek his relatives.
But Nathaniel would have been dead.
Nathaniel would have been dead. Sequoyah would not see him, but he might have met Howard. So what sparks your fire to find out more and more about your family?
Well, Anderson Gratz wrote a book. It was B&M Gratz. He collected letters and a lot of business letters, and we always had that book. And then the internet, actually, when I got on I joined the DAR, and you have to do a lot of research.
Right.
Yeah, you have to connect the generations, and fortunately, a lot was online. But I couldn't connect Mariah with Nathaniel. I thought, oh no, I've done everything that I couldn't connect. There wasn't a will or marriage license. But fortunately, the genealogists at the DAR, they had the information in Washington where their center is. And I guess another member of the family may have already gone that route. So they didn't. My genealogist at the DAR said, don't worry about it. We got through, and I was accepted. I was in the CAR, but they didn't keep, that's Children of the American Revolution. That I thought, well, I don't have to do much of anything, but they don't keep those records, apparently. Or at least there wasn't a record of mine
For you to find this.
but they did have information, so I don't know.
So I have met, and I have an interview in the Cherokee, the Newsman. I've met someone from the the SAR, Sons of American Revolution, and he said that they had interviewed a Cherokee that was a descendant of Sequoyah, because Sequoyah, being the son of Nathaniel Gist, who fought, and then Revolutionary War could be in the SAR. So there's that interview in there too. You got that connection with the Lexington, but no Gratz's, no relatives other than your immediate family here in Georgia.
Well, I have a Benjamin's niece married a Southern gentleman, and they lived in Savannah.
Oh,
Solomon Cohen was the husband. And even though she came from Philadelphia, and the family was, city of brotherly love, they didn't believe in slavery. But she adapted, apparently, to her new environment. And she had 3 children, and a new book has just come out, Liberty Street by Friedman. It came out a few months ago about that branch of the family. So it's at bookstores now. And they had one of their sons, well, the only son they have, Gratz Cohen, was killed He was a Confederate soldier, and he was killed. Unfortunately, it was friendly fire, and it was right at the end of the war.
Oh,
Yeah, but it's all in the book.
it's all in there, but
And pictures, too, of the family. Margaret Wise Brown was a Gist descendant. She wrote children's books. And then we have the Olympian,
we have the Olympian.
Jeffy Stone.
And I was in Pittsburgh, and I visited the bridge that's by the stadium where they have the sculptures of Christopher Gist, and let me see if I say this correctly, Echota, who was the indigenous person. And
He was a guide, too, I think. He went
you think he was a guide? So Christopher Gist was a guide to the young George Washington when they were crossing that river there. And there was like 3 rivers in Pittsburgh. And Echota, I was told, is also the name of a town upstream. But Washington had different ideas of what he wanted that area to become, and it became Pittsburgh. So Christopher did that with George Washington. He also, and this is Nathaniel's father, he also knew that Nathaniel was with the Cherokees. Nathaniel did some trading with them and then he had a child with the sister, Butte. But Christopher also explored the Miami Valley around Cincinnati, and he did that for business people too. And there's
the Ohio Company.
There's exactly a book called The Coming of Christopher Gist. So he was a multi-person.
He wrote all these journals, and there's
The journals,
went
right.
back to England, and it made the settlers want to move west after he explored. He opened up the Ohio Valley. There's a movie, Washington's Armor. I saw it on Prime Television, and it talks about Gist and Christopher Gist and Washington. It's more about Washington's life, but Christopher, it goes through their journey.
Through that journey.
And then on YouTube, if you type Christopher Gist, and that's free on YouTube, and Into the Wilderness it's called, and that's a documentary. It's very good. I like that.
I was aware of that. I wanted to say just a little bit more about the women in the family and their relations with children, and I might be writing about that for another part of it, but I want to keep it straight in my mind at this point because Mariah, whose portrait is on the wall, and we'll look at that before we finish and look at your portraits, she is the lady in the first book, the pie seller, the drunk, and the lady, and she was very instrumental and prominent in having the foundation of an orphanage after the cholera epidemic in 1833 in Lexington, and established a society that still exists today with children's interests.